Hello, welcome to another session, hands-on session on JavaScript ES6 classes. Today we're going to be looking at JavaScript ES6 classes. We're going to be discussing about what it is, why we need it, and also some other things we'll discuss in this session. And as usual, we get our hands dirty with codes. Let's proceed. So what are ES6 classes? ES6 classes are templates for creating JavaScript objects. So what this means they just provide a template. We can call them syntactic sugar, a different syntax to which we can still achieve the creation of objects through. So when we want to create objects, the basic way we know before ES6 classes was either we create an object literal, or we create function constructors, or we make use of factory functions. But with ES6 we are able to follow the modernized way, or the conventional way of creating classes and objects. If you're coming from PHP, if you're coming from Java, and just very structured languages, you should understand ES6 classes. It won't be new to you. Let's move on. So why do we need ES6 classes? So we need ES6 classes because the syntax is simpler and less prone to error. We also need it because it's easy to set up, and I think those are the major two reasons why we will need ES6 classes. So in this session we're going to look at building an ES6 class. We're going to look at inheritance. We're going to look at static methods. We're also going to look at method chaining, and do have the general pros and cons of ES6 classes. And with that, I think we should have more understanding of what ES6 classes can do and how we can make use of it. Let's dive into hands dirty code. So building an ES6 class. So how do we build an ES6 class? To build an ES6 class, we just make use of what we call the class, or call it a keyword. So we make use of the class and define our class name. So say class user, and class user will have a constructor. So the constructor defines things that you want to run when the class is instantiated. So everything within the constructor runs immediately the class is being instantiated. And what do we want to use with the user constructor? We want the user constructor to get the first name and last name, and we want it to assign it to this underscore first name, and also we want the last name to be assigned to this dot underscore last name. So we assign the first name to this dot first name property, and we assign the last name to this dot last name property. Also, we want to have a method that says get full name. Oops, I have to make this capital letter. Get full name. So the get full name will just return a method, and the method, it will return a string, and the string will contain the first name, which we kept in the this dot underscore first name property, and the last name, which we kept in the this dot underscore last name property. Very simple, clean, and straightforward. So in order to make use of this, all we need to do is we now want to create an object from the user class. So in order to create an object from the user class, all we need to do is create a variable and create a new instance of the user class. So how do we do that? We say const John. We want to create a John object is equals to the new, and we call the class, which is the user class, and we enter the first name, which is John, and we enter the second name, which is Doe. Very fond of using John Doe. So now we've instantiated a new user into the John object. So with the John object, we can actually do something like this: console.log, and create called the John object, and we have a method here. We can call on the method get full name method, so that this gives us the full name. So once I save this, we should actually see John Doe on our console. Good. Now we have seen John Doe on our console, meaning that our John object sees the class user, and our John object sees the class user. So that's everything that is there to creating a JavaScript ES6 class, nothing more. So you can actually compare this to when you have when you want to create a factory function, or a function constructor, or a constructor function, where you have something like this: const user, let me use the right, will be the right way, function user, then you now have to create this function, this keyword, you say first name and last name. We have this keyword, and you say this dot first name is equals to first name, and you say this dot last name is equals to last name, right? I think I'm on track. Then you want to create this method, you have to now do this dot get full name will be equals to a function where you just do something, an arrow function, and you return the same statement. Let me just copy this and put it here. So this is how a function constructor or a constructor function looks like. This is how a constructor function looks like. If you notice, you will find out that if you've been very conversant with PHP, Java, you'll find out that this doesn't really look like creating a blueprint in which an object will be defined. If you understand the standard way of writing classes in OOP, the classes in OOP seems to follow this convention much more than this convention. But before the adoption of ES6, this is how we actually write our class, or create a blueprint on top of which we can actually build an object. So if we still to show you that the constructor function actually work, if we actually comment this out, let me put the underscore so we don't have issues. If we actually comment the class out, we expect the constructor function to work. So when we click on save, okay, user is not defined as, because I have to make this a capital letter U. You still get everything still work the way it is, but this doesn't actually looks like the standard class that everybody understand, because that's JavaScript for you. So ES6 came up with this syntax this template that enables us to create classes the way we are supposed to create classes. That's having the class keyword, defining a constructor, and adding our methods we want on that constructor. That's what ES6 provides for us. So having said that, I believe we're through with building an ES6 class. Now we move to inheritance. So how do we work with inheritance in ES6 classes? Very simple and straightforward. Now we have the user class. Assuming we have a class called members, class members, we would want to use to make members inherit the properties of the user class. We use the usual keyword extends the user class, and we also want it to inherit the properties, general properties of the user class, such that that's the full first name and the last name. So in order to do that, we have to first of all, like when you define every class, create a constructor which runs constructor function that runs when every class is being instantiated. So how do we get access to this method? Of course, with the class, the member class, we need to get the first name of the person, we need to get the last name of the person, and we also need to get membership. So membership type, we want to get the membership type. Now we already have the first name and the last name property in the user class, which we can see is the parent class to members class. So how do we get access to these properties? Now, in order to get access to these properties, we don't want to do something like this dot underscore first username. That will be repeating ourselves. But because we've extended the user class into members, we can just use the super keyword, and we just pass in the first name and the last name. Now, once we've done that, you can see that the parent class, which is the user class, does not have the membership property. The membership property is only present in the members class. Let's keep this at singular in the member class. So all we do is we define a new property in the member class, this dot underscore member. Sorry, let's spell that well. Membership type, yeah, is equals to membership type. Good. So now we have an additional property on our members class. So we can also have a method on the membership class that says register, and what this function does is just to print out, return a string that says, now look at it, this, we want to get the first name and the last name, which is this dot underscore first name, right? And we want to get the last name, say this dot underscore last name is now a, and we want to get the membership property that will display the type of membership that the user has, is now a membership. So say this dot underscore membership type, let's say member. Good. So we have that. So what the register method is going to do is just going to return a string that tells you the username and tells you the group she's registered as a member or the group the membership type the person has. So how do we do that? Let's recap. We called the parent class. The member class extends the parent class, which is the user, and because it extends the user class, it inherits the properties and methods of the parent class, which is the user class. That's why we are able to use the super and passing the first name and last name into the parent class, which in turn give us access to this dot first name and this dot last name. So with that access, we can now create our own method and actually use access the this dot first name and this dot last name properties, which we have in our parent class, and also use the property which is present in our child class, which is the member class. So let's create a new object from our members class. So we can say const Mary is equals to new. So we want to call the member class, and we want to pass in how many parameters are we expecting? 3. So we pass in Mary's first name, which is Mary. We pass in Mary's last name, which is Doe, and we pass in a membership type. So she's a platinum member, and that's it. I hope I get the spelling of platinum correctly. If I don't, that's a result of too much coding. So let's move on. So we've actually created a new object Mary, which create a new instance of the members class, and we pass in the first name, the last name, and the membership type. So with this, we should be able to do console.log, and we should be able to call the register method and see what it gives to us. So we can say Mary dot register. Register. Okay, good. So now we expect that this gives us Mary Doe is now a platinum member. That's what we're expecting to get. We're expecting to get on our console. So when we save, good, it works. So now we have Mary Doe is now a platinum member. So if you notice, the this.first name property and this.last name property in the member class are not direct properties of the members class. However, they are properties of the parent class, which is the user. And also, we should be able to call console.log. We should be able to call the get full name property on the members class. I think so. So we say Mary dot get full name. So we have access to that as well. So we click on save. We still have Mary Doe. So we can actually access the methods in the parent class, and that's everything that has to do with inheritance. I think the little we can show for now, we see that with inheritance we can access the properties of the parent class, and the child class inherits both the methods and the properties of the parent class, which is user. So I think with that we can say we've understood inheritance. Now we move to static methods. So what's a static method? Static methods are methods that we don't really need to instantiate the class before we can gain access. So for example, in the members class, we can create a static method that says count all members. So we want to know all members we have in the platinum class, or generally in all the membership type. So I will just mimic this and say return just a simple string that says we have 50 members. We have 50 members. That's all. or we have 50 users in the platinum membership. So that's what this static method is going to do. It's just going to this method is just going to return a statement that said we have 50 users in the platinum class. So I want to show you that even before we actually create the instance, Mary instance, we can get access to the static class. So we don't need to instantiate the class before we have access to the static methods inside our classes. So we can do console.log, and we can say member dot, call the static method count all members, and we call that. So when we click on save, we should see the count all members before the John Doe. So when we click on save, so we see we have 50 users in the platinum membership. That was even possible before we declared the new. So let me comment this out to see if those ones are not interfering. So we still click on save. We can see that we still have 50 users in the platinum class, even without instantiating the member class or creating an object out of the member class. We just directly access the static method in the member class, which will not be possible if this is not static. So when I remove this static keyword there, when we click on save, it tells you count is not what? A function. So that's what we can achieve with the help of the static keyword. So I will keep this as it is. I believe we understand what the static keyword is. Now we move to method chaining. So how do we chain a method? Very simple and straightforward. So here in method chaining, we actually did something when we were defining the Marys, creating the Marys object. Let me comment this out, and also comment the both of these out. Yep. And comment this out also. Good. So when we created a new Mary object out of the members class, we can also do something. We can chain the register method directly on this membership class and have this just become a string immediately. So we can do something like this. Dot, you can see the moment we put dot, we can see we begin to see IntelliSense begin to give us all methods we can chain to this object. So we can see dot get full name, So by the time we do this and we click on save, okay, nothing is coming up, so we need to console.log Mary. So by the time we log Mary, we found out that Mary is not going to be a class anymore, but it's just going to have a string. It's just going to be a string that contains the full name of Mary. So by the time we click on save, you see it's just a Mary Doe. So this is no longer a class. The Mary is no longer, an object, because we chained a method that returns a string and not an instance of a class. So we instantiated the class implicitly and chained a method to the class, which then returns a string. So therefore, the variable that we are assigning this statement is going to actually become a string, because what the method we chained to the instance of the class returns is a string and not an instance. So we can do this by doing the type of Mary. So we can do, let's do console.log. You can see that when we do console.log, and we do type of Mary. We pass in Mary. So no, we see. You can see it gives us a string and not the instance of that object. So this is what we call method chaining. So we can, with ES6 classes, we can directly chain a method to our class at the point of instance. However, note that the variable you're assigning to that instance would automatically turn to whatever the return value of the method that you change to it is. So by the time we remove this, let's just say if we remove this, we have our instance back. So when we click on save, you can now see that Mary is actually an object, and you can see what Mary contains the first name property, membership property, and every other thing. But by the time we chain an object, so we chain a method to it, like we did previously with the get full name, it automatically becomes a string that returns Mary Doe. However, you cannot do additional chaining to this because I don't believe it's possible. So let's see if we can change the register method to this. All you get is an error. So you can, the method chaining on a class only allows one method per every instance. So every instance you create, you can only chain one method to it. So advice when you want to chain your method, if for example you have the members class and you want to run your register method, instead of doing something like this, you actually, okay, let's remove this. You actually create an object, then you come down here and you start doing something like this, console.log, then you see Mary dot register and save, which gives you this. You can actually do everything in one line. Instead of doing this, you can actually do everything in one line by doing this dot register, because you know this is the method you want to access immediately after you instantiate the class, and you don't need any other method. So you can actually chain that so that you can kill two birds with one stone and just come down and log your words console.mary and have everything working as it's supposed to be. So here you have Mary Doe is now a platinum user. So Mary is no longer returning an instance of the members class. It's actually returning a string that is returned from the register method, because we changed the register method to the member class. I believe that has covered method chaining. We move to the next one, which is the general pros and cons of ES6 classes. So I was going to talk to us about the older features that a class offers and the difference between the class that JavaScript offers and the standard classes that we were taught and we know. So we were taught that classes have private, protected, and public. However, JavaScript ES6 class doesn't provide a means for having private, protected, and public. However, every properties and methods of JavaScript classes are publicly accessible, because you can access them at the instance of that object. When we were writing the Mary's object, we found out that we can, when we click on this dot, you see IntelliSense begins to give us the properties. If I do underscore, you can see you can access membership type, you can access a lot of things in the members object, and that's because JavaScript treats all those objects as, all those properties as public. However, there are various methods you can use to make your class, your methods private and public. I will link them in the, I'll put a link in the description below to places where you can find those courses or those materials that will help you to understand how you can make your properties in your JavaScript classes private or public. So I will do that in order not to make the video long, to keep this as short as possible and precise on what we want to do, which is understanding ES6 classes. Also, if you notice, if you've been following through, you'll find me putting an underscore on some properties in each of the classes I created. Like this first name, I kept an underscore. It's just a way to talk to my fellow developers that'll be working on this project or this code, that every of the properties you see that has a preceding underscore is private. So it's a way to communicate to other developers that everything you see having an underscore before it, or every properties you see in a class having an underscore preceding it, is, or before the property name, is, I imagine it to be a protected or private property, so you should not directly access those property outside. However, that does not make it not accessible, but because it's just another added advantage you can use. It's just an added method you can use to actually convey that the properties in this class are actually private and not public. So when a developer comes in, or when somebody reads through the code, he knows that every property that has an underscore before it, its property name, is actually a private property. So for methods, you can also do that, preceding underscore, meaning this is a private property. But in the real sense, JavaScript has no standard way of actually just flagging your properties of your classes between protected, private, and public. It treats everything as public. So I thought I should just chip that in, and I believe with that we've come to the conclusion of this session, and I hope this helps a lot of us understand classes better. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have contribution, you can drop them in the link below, and we'll have a better coding days ahead. So happy coding, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, and stay blessed. So